Hey there everyone, and welcome back to Higurashi When They Cry Ray. Effectively, the last chapter in last volume of Higurashi May Cry that's on Steam. So last time, Rika decided to take a different look on the situation and decided maybe forgetting about the old world might help her be able to go back to the old world. So, yes. Let's go ahead and push on from where we are right now. So first we put the ones in the pot that take the longest to cook. Okay. When do you put in the onions? The onions will melt if we cook them too long, so we can leave them for last. You worked so hard on cutting the onions too. I'm sure they'll taste delicious. Okay. My mother smiled. She seemed very happy. Her smile was warm. I thought I'd completely forgotten over these 100 years, but I remembered, for less than a moment in time. My parents had to die in 1981. That fate was unchangeable. And besides, we could never get along in the first place, so it didn't matter if they died. As thoughts like those overlapped, maybe my concern with my parents had waned. Our hearts had steadily lost their connection, and the situation had steadily worsened. Before now, I hadn't thought I could gain anything from this world. Not once did I think it would make me realize something like that. With a mother like this, maybe spending time with her would be warm. It would be fun. That's right. The reason I rejected my mother's warmth? Maybe it was because I wanted to soften the sadness I felt at her death. If I couldn't change the fate she met in 1981, then she might as well hate me. Was that the idea at the root of it all? In this world, my mother hadn't died in 1981. She would stay here for a long time to come. I felt just a little jealous of Rika Furude, and I was stricken with the desire to return this world's me to her. This world was so different than my previous one. Keiichi wasn't here. Shion wasn't here. Hanyu wasn't here. But in exchange, Satoshi and my parents were here. There was no club, but there would be one soon. Satoko wasn't my best friend, but she could be in the future. I could weigh my previous world and this one on the scales, but I wouldn't know which way it would tip. I decided to leave this decision up to Hanyu. Yes, my destiny wasn't mine alone. It was Hanyu's destiny too. Whichever I chose, I would have to talk to Hanyu before making my final decision. This multiple world concept was something I only had because Hanyu had lent me her power. If Hanyu had never given it to me, it would have been over from the very start. Takano would have sliced open my belly, and that would have been it. We put the lid on the curry, so now it just had to simmer. My father returned in the meantime, and really enjoyed seeing us making curry together. Then, at my mother's suggestion, he set the table. In any normal 1981, he really hated it when my mother told him to do anything. But he wasn't troubled at all at the prospect in this world. Rika, put the rice on everyone's plates, please. Can you do that? Yep, I can. Of course, I can do that, idiot. It's something I'd thought many times before. But this time, I didn't. I opened the warm, steaming rice cooker and plated the rice. My mother brought the piping hot curry pot over and split it among everyone's plates. Wow, that's good. Rika served the rice and Mom made the curry. It looks delicious. Oh, that isn't right. You made the curry with me while your father did nothing. Meep. I peeled myself back. Furude Rika shouted that I wasn't needed, so I pulled back. I withdrew inside Rika Furude, and she got to enjoy a family dinner from the bottom of her heart. When we saw the crooked potatoes, we all laughed pleasantly. I would never cut potatoes so ugly, but Rika Furude was still bad at this, so these things happened. What the shit? That's not what I wanted. Oh, it's just that. When I used the same ingredients, the only thing curry tasted like was the curry powder from the store. After 100 years with the same curry powder, it tasted the same, no matter how you made it. But this particular curry tasted different. I cried at what Rika Furude had lost. No, at what I had lost. Rika Furude got to experience the warmth she had once forgotten. I wondered if another ball would come flying and hit me in the head. Then I would pass out for a while, and upon waking again, I would be gone. Wasn't that the best possible happy ending? I was the stranger here. I thought this universe was the strange one from out of all the other parallel universes, but it was me. I was the stranger. Then what had that world been, the one I had reached after 100 years? Was its happiness that we'd all won, Kiichi, Rina, Mion, Satoko, Shion, and I, was it all worth nothing? That wasn't true. It was a radiant world, one we'd all won the right to live in after 100 years of learning to trust in each other. It was replete with a different kind of happiness than this one. Both shone brightly, and neither was better or worse than the other. Maybe, in the end, most worlds weren't better or worse than any other. I only lived in the extreme worlds, the ones where I struggled to see whether Takano killed me or not. So out of all the infinite universes, I'd started to think of them as either right or wrong. But the multiverse wasn't simple enough to think of in binaries like that. Tomorrow's dinner might be steak or salted celery. It wasn't about which was right and which was wrong. In both of these worlds, I'd spend a happy time eating dinner with family. What if my respective selves had been reversed during tonight's dinner? But that was an incredibly tasteless thing to ask. The real problem wasn't that big to begin with. Neither my last world nor this world was better than the other. I needed to accept that. I still didn't know where the fragment I needed to return to my world was. But what if I never knew, and the power of the crystal ball connecting me to Hanyu disappeared? I would disappear like the stranger I was, and give this body back to Rika Furude. From her point of view, she would have to say that I had returned to my old world. Just as I once called this world a daydream, for Rika Furude, my old world was the real daydream. Her strange delusions of me would simply disappear along with it. Maybe it didn't really matter how to return to my original world. Which world would I decide was the original? Maybe that was really all this was about. After we finished eating, we cleaned up our places and started washing things. My father said he had a meeting tonight, and he was about to leave again. Rika, could you wash these for me? I have something to talk with Dad about, so please do the rest. Okay. I responded cheerfully, as Rika Furude. But I had realized something slightly out of place. If she had something to talk to my father about, there was plenty of chances during dinner. But she made me wash the dishes so they could talk amongst themselves. Rika just had to stay put and wash the dishes. But I couldn't suppress the curiosity that was welling up. So I snuck over to the front door to listen in on what my parents were saying. My mother was the one talking. I wouldn't be surprised if this was something really, really bad. Her tone of voice wasn't a cheery one. Yeah. Yamamoto's sensei is discussing it with a big hospital in the city. From what he said, it might be her heart more than her brain. Apparently, there's a wonderful doctor there who can... Oh my... I knew it. I knew I shouldn't have asked. Yamamoto certainly hadn't promised to keep our discussion in the nurse's office to himself. As soon as I left, he'd probably called my parents and told them their daughter was ranting about nonsense. He probably explained it as my isolation at school wearing down on my mind and damaging my heart. Considering what I'd told him, even that would be a conscientious interpretation. Did you talk to Rika about it? I will after this. I mean, it feels like we're tricking her, given that tomorrow the doctor will be here and we'll suddenly be off to the hospital. But, you know, when I think about how she feels, I can understand. Her friends got up and moved away, leaving her all alone. I should have tried to understand her feelings. Rika's always been saying she didn't want to move. We didn't wait for her to deal with that, and we made her repress it. When is Yamamoto-sensei coming tomorrow? He said the evening, but he didn't give me an exact time. He said he'd prefer it if you were there too. I'll be in the assembly hall tomorrow, so when he gets here, give me a call. Alright. Don't be discouraged. I understand why she's saying she wants to go back to her original world, but there's nothing we can do anymore. This was decided between the village and the national government. I at least want to give her some fun things to look back on when she remembers living in Hinamizawa. You're right. It's time, so I'll get going. I'll leave. Rika, to you. Alright. Come back safely. Yeah, I kind of figured it wasn't going to be that good. I snuck back into the kitchen, the same as I'd come. But I think the floorboards must have creaked. When my mother returned to the kitchen, she still didn't sound particularly cheerful. Were you listening, Rika? Yamamoto-san sensei called us today. He told us what you talked to him about. Yamamoto's really mean for talking about it without asking me. Rika, I'm sorry. You wanted to live in this village forever, didn't you? We never thought about your feelings, and I think we said a lot of pretty harsh things to you. It's okay. It doesn't really bother me. My mother's apology was meant to be heard by the Rika Furude living in this world. It wasn't for me to accept, so I denied it. But my mother kept apologizing anyway. I was going to deny it again, but I stopped. It wasn't my turn. I should pull back. And then I thought I felt myself begin to fade out. As I did, I felt my eyes grow warm. The rest was, for me, a misty, hazy world. I cried as I buried my face in my mother's chest. And my mother cried as well as she hugged me. If I could have disappeared like that, this, too, might have been Rika Furude's life. After that, my mother told a lot of stories of Hinamizawa, as if to reminisce about her own childhood. About what she was like as a kid, what she did, and where. About things happening, or not happening. As she talked, we comforted each other, both of us wanting our beloved village to stay in our hearts forever. And when your mom was little, all the elderly people in the village treated me like I was really important. That was because they believed I was the reincarnation of Oyashiro-sama. Oyashiro-sama's reincarnation? I've never told you, have I? There's an old legend in the Furude family. If there are 8 first children in a row who are girls, that 8th girl is said to be the reincarnation of Oyashiro-sama. That girl happened to be me. Not me. You're our first child, and a girl, but you would be the 9th. We have a maternal line, I suppose. Your mom is the 8th. Oyashiro-sama's reincarnation. But this is a secret, okay? We have to make sure not to tell anyone about it. The only ones who know are your late grandmother, me, and you. It's a secret between the two of us, okay? Sometimes, as proof of trust between girls, they reveal secrets to one another. For my mother, this was probably a trivial secret that she could use for that reason. But for me, it was different. Hanyu was first able to appear before the 8th of 8 consecutive generation of girls, before Oya Shiro-sama's reincarnation. But in this world, Rika Furude wasn't the 8th. She wasn't Oya Shiro-sama's reincarnation. So, in this world, Hanyu couldn't appear before Rika Furude. And that was when, with my face buried in my mother's chest, I felt a warmth, no, a literal heat. Does she have a fever? No. This felt the same as Hanyu's power. Well, this was a secret. With my grandmother dead, there was only one who knew my mother was Oyashiro-sama's reincarnation, the woman herself, which meant if my mother was gone, the fragment of there already being a reincarnation of Oyashiro-sama in this world would disappear. My warm tears ceased to flow, and I felt my eyes drying up as I plummeted to the bottom of the abyss of despair. It was her. Mom had the fragment in her. If I could have, I would have chosen never to have, If I could, I would have chosen never to remember what that fact entailed. Oh boy. Going from one really bad thing to another really bad possible thing. Her mom's gonna have to die. When I tried using the crystal ball with Yamamoto today, it still hadn't recovered enough for him to talk to Hanyu. Only half a day had passed, but maybe if I went to the storehouse, I'd get through. Hanyu once told me the old heir from the past had remained in the storehouse, and that she felt comfortable there. Maybe that meant the storehouse was filled with Hanyu's power. In other words, while the crystal ball didn't have quite enough power, maybe being in the storehouse would help a little. Late that night, I slipped out of bed and snuck into the storehouse. I wanted nothing more than to talk to Hanyu. I went to the altar before the holy vessel and spoke into the crystal ball. Can you hear me? Hanyu. The light in the ball was feeble, but its otherworldly glow was clearly present. Please, let her hear me. My wish was granted, and a quiet voice, so low it might disappear at any moment, spoke in answer. I can hear you, Rika. Hanyu, thank goodness. Listen, I don't know what to do. I don't know. I think that's how it's supposed to be said. This wasn't the time for crying. I needed to tell her everything I discovered and ask Hanyu's opinion. I quashed my frantic emotions and told her the fragment was in my mother. Hanyu stayed quiet for a few moments. She knew, of course, that I'd have to kill my mother to return the fragment to the world of the gods. It makes sense, doesn't it? You can only appear to Oya Shiro-sama's reincarnation. I'm not the 8th in this world, so you can't appear to me. The 9th isn't good enough, huh? It was a very long time ago. Ancient times. So ancient, even I've mostly forgotten. It happened back when Hanyu was still living in Hinamizawa. before Hanyu became Oyashiro-sama. It was how it all began, which Hanyu never told me about, no matter how much I asked her. My human self, that is, when I decided I would become a god, my daughter, your ancestor, Rika, was very sad about that. She knew I'd made the decision because I'd lost hope in the human world. I took all the sins of the human world upon me, for there was no other way to cleanse those sins other than to destroy the sinners themselves. People were forcing their sins on each other, an ugly existence. Their excessive cruelty caused me to lose hope in this world. I undertook all the sins of the human world and cleansed them by letting them kill me. I entrusted that final duty to my own daughter. I thought that unless I gave her that role, she would one day be despised as the daughter of a demon god and lose all hope in the human world herself. My daughter didn't like that role, but she understood the weight of her mission, and in the end, she went through with it. But she said something to me, that she would change the human world, in which only the price of life could purify its sins. Humans would combine their strength and help each other, cooperating with mutual benefit in mind. She swore to me that she would create this utopia, which her mother had only dreamed of. Please, Mother, do not lose hope in the world of man. I swear that I shall heal that sadness. But I would become a god. I couldn't accept my But I would become a god. I couldn't accept my daughter's feelings. No, actually, that wasn't it. I had already lost hope in the corrupted world of man. And I just didn't want to look at it anymore. But my daughter made a firm promise that she would remake that world into something better. Then I shall believe in what you feel. When in this land people lived happily, aid one another, support one another, and think as one, I shall return to this land once more. My daughter killed me and took control of the village, the divine power of the demon god dwelling within her. She became their leader and created doctrines so that everyone would trust in and help one another. By making them to fear a curse where discordant hearts would revive the specter of the demon god. She led them strictly, not letting my purification go to waste, so that those purified sins would never again revisit the village. And so the village did regain a temporary peace, but I never descended to them again. I had rejected the human world much too strongly. But no matter how strong the power to reject, it can never last forever. Whether hearts, or walls, or lids, or Whether hearts, or walls, or lids, or doors, there is nothing that time will not decay. Even the power shutting me away from the human world wouldn't last forever. My daughter would learn the limits of that power through a revelation from a higher god than me. It was said that when 8 generations of Furude bore a girl as their first child, I would come again. The miracle of 8 consecutive firstborn girls would be the key that broke my power of rejection. My daughter left that legend to the Furude family, and it passed down to her descendants, so that this land would continue becoming my ideal. Whoa! Finally, showed up. So, Rika, when you were born as the 8th girl in a row, I was connected to the human world again. Long ago, I may have hated and shunned the human world, but a millennium without contact was more than enough time to heal my sadness. At some point, I actually started to feel sad at the prospect of living in a world where I was all alone. I had intended to spend those 1,000 years in rejection, but it was also a punishment for me. I realized how shallow my feelings had been when I hated and despaired over the human world. And before I realized it, the Furude family started giving birth to consecutive girls. When your mother was pregnant, I wished so much for it to be a girl. I'm sure. The first face I remember seeing was my... the first face I remember seeing wasn't my mother's. It was yours. Maybe abandoning the human world for 1,000 years was my punishment. Humans can only live in the human world, and they must live earnestly in the world they are born into. For someone who made light of that and tried to abandon the world so easily, maybe an exile of 1,000 years is a fitting punishment. Hanyu's words were heavy. Maybe, having been carefree in our walk between countless worlds, even comparing our lives to dice rolls, we had been sinful. I lived with you, my friend and daughter of 1,000 years. And when we came to the dead end of 1983, I committed another sin. I used my power to change your fate. Are you saying that in the very first world, you should have accepted the fate of Takano cutting me open and killing me? It may sound cruel to you, Rika, but that is how I feel right now. I made light of the world I lived in. And I made light of the world you lived in, too. I should have lived in earnest in the world where we were together. I should have welcomed it, no matter its end. Stop that. Wallowing in masochism might make you feel better, but it makes me unhappy. I said I didn't want to surrender to that fate, and that I'd fight on forever to achieve a much more wonderful life. And made this 100-year journey with you. We're at the end. It's absurd to come out with that now. You're just being sentimental. Aren't you just making light of this world, too? Which you and I built together over 100 years? Don't you think that's selfish? It is man's sin to save a dying animal, then bask in rapture. We go up the snowy mountain, kill the beast, and offer their numbers to the gods. After all this, you're saying it was my fate to die too? You've gone insane! I don't care what you say. The world we want is a result of our sweat and tears. You and I are the only ones who can understand how brilliantly it shines. And now you're rejecting it? Rika, please let me get back on topic. Once I had my fill of this world with you, the 8th, I planned to disappear at the end of your life. It had nothing to do with the time you'd be alive for, so I never told you. But in that world, your mother is the 8th. That means I've already had contact with the world of man, was satisfied with how wonderful Hinamizawa had become, and had already left for a higher plane. In that world, I've already left. That's why I can't appear there. But there's a fragment of your world there, and it's in my mother, which means this. Only my mother knows that she is the 8th. If I kill her, the contradictory force saying you can't appear here will vanish. Correct? That's right. Originally, it was an obvious fact that your mother is the 8th in that world, and killing her wouldn't necessarily change anything. But after you drifted here from another world, Rika, it would be like mooring a dock to... But after you drifted here from another world, Rika, it would be like mooring a boat to dock. It was fortunate only your mother knew the truth. If a lot of other people knew, you would have had to kill them all. I'm sure you wanted my opinion on whether you should kill your mother to return to the previous world, or stay in this world. I did. This whole time, I've been investigating what kind of world... This whole time, I've been investigating what kind of world you're in. And when I found out what it was, I expected this day would eventually come. And I predicted you would grow indecisive and talk to me about it. And that you would want to choose a world based on the result of our discussion. So I thought long and hard about how to guide you. Unlike the world of gods, the words in the world of man are narrow. No matter what words I choose, they will carry bias within them. I thought very hard about what words to say so that you would truly choose for yourself. And I still am. After all, you've left the answer in my hands. If I suggested you should choose this world, you would choose it. You would shift the responsibility of paying the price to me. That would be cowardly, and there is no worth in a life resulting from such a decision. As someone who has trodden countless worlds and left her footprints outside the world of man, you must make a responsible choice without relying on me, with your own strength. I know what you're trying to say. You couldn't bear me shifting the blame and saying, this happened because I did what you said. Decide your own life for yourself. Easy enough to understand. I wanted to tell you this, too. I was happy spending my life with you, and through those countless worlds we walked together, I learned that Hinamizawa overflowed with kind and gentle cooperation. It had everything I wanted from the world. I wanted to say that even if you chose a world without me in it, and I was to disappear, I would still be happy. Hanyu. Hanyu had foreseen this. Foreseen that this world would grow even warmer for me. But Hanyu herself was in opposition to this world. Any amount of discussing this with Hanyu, who was from the previous world, would only make it more difficult to forsake that one. She had even anticipated that after discussing it with her, I would need to make a decision from an impartial viewpoint. That's why she said it. She wanted to accept whatever fate Rika Furude's decision gave her. She didn't want me to worry about her and live in the world that I liked the best. Let's say I did choose this world. What would happen to you? Because of that world's rules, our long journey together would come to an end. For you, a life in that world, and for me, the fact that my time has already ended in that world would be applied. Doesn't that mean you would disappear? But that's a really, really pleasant thing. Rika, you seem to think of it as me dying. And at first, I thought so too. That the me in that world would die. But the Hanyu of that world, she may have disappeared, but she was filled with joy. She spent her life with your mother, enjoying her time to the fullest. Your mother is still alive, but that world's version of me is having a wonderful dream, enveloped in kindness, in a sleep from which she'll never awake. I'm sure that warmth, that comfort, is like that of a mother's womb. Now that I know that, I actually wonder if you will choose that world. For me. Are you serious? If you had lived for 1,000 years, Rika, you would understand that warmth. I could feel an ecstasy. I could feel an ecstasy in Hanyu's words. Hanyu had lived for a millennium, and she understood that, in a way, I couldn't. You have to be joking. I'm just a kid. I'm only 100 years old. Of course I can't understand. Rika, would you please stop using me as a reason to run away from this choice? That was the truth. My old world and this one are being weighed on scales in my heart. It isn't tipping, even slightly, toward either side. Trying to shift the responsibility for choosing onto Hanyu was just me being irresponsible. I can tell you everything about that world's construction to help you make your choice. First, Keiichi Maibara, who told us many times that destiny could be broken. He did not transfer schools in this world. I knew that for a while now. He wasn't in my class. For a time, Keiichi suffered the stress of his entrance exams. But unlike in the previous world, he wasn't firing any toy guns at children. He strengthened his mind, endured the temptation, and finally overcame his mental weakness. Right now, he's trying to deal with the exams awaiting him as someone with a firm pride in his breast. What? Which means Keiichi's sin is absent. Which is why he never moved here. Rina Ryugu, too, never moved to Ibaraki since her parents' company stayed in business. Therefore, the divorce never happened either. For that reason, Rina will feel no guilt. Rina had no sin either. On the day of the ceremony, where the elder sister had her back tattooed, Mion Sonozaki and Shion Sonozaki didn't switch places. I see. I got the feeling that Mion at school... I see. I got the feeling that the Mion at school seemed somehow different. She always loved board games, but she talked about her little sister knowing more about them. I see. I get it. Mion didn't push her role as a successor onto her younger sister, and now spends her days training to be the head of her family. Shion, too, attends a distant school so she can support the family without getting in the way. And she's working her hardest as we speak. The sisters both felt guilty at switching on the day of the tattoo ceremony. If that didn't happen, then Mion and Shion had no sin. I don't think I need to go on, but Satoko Haojiao doesn't carry the sin of patricide. Satoko grew closer with her stepfather, and they rebuilt their relationship. Because of that, she wasn't possessed by that terrible illness. The Haojiao family didn't oppose the village, and they weren't even ostracized. Satoko had no sin. Well, for Satoko and her family, this would be their ideal world. For Satoko and her family? Wait, no. Isn't this the ideal world for everybody? Keiichi came to Hinamizawa because he had committed a sin. But in this world, he didn't, and was right now living his very best. Rina avoided her sad fate too, and never sinned. She called herself by her given name, Rina, and was living happily. Mion and Shion were leading happy lives too. And the only time in this one, she shows up. So far. Without the tattoo incident, they were friendly sisters, the way they'd been born. They were forced to live apart due to family matters, but that wouldn't be enough to tear them apart. For Satoko, this world was exactly the world of her dreams. Surrounded by the warmth of her family and big brother, she was just a bit more. Shit, I forgot about that. She was leading a bright and healthy life. This was the world that I, as her friend, should be wishing for the most. For Satoshi, well, this was the only world in which he still existed. In all the worlds I'd been to, this was the only one where he was alive. Satoshi could exist anywhere but here. Okay, there we go. I completely forgot. I just went right through it. Okay, let's save here. I think next time will be the end of this part of Ray. So, yeah. Anyways, next time we will push on with this part of Ray. And until next time, everybody. Goodbye.